your presentation.
Okay, did you want me to do the
Questions?
questions? Yes.
Yes, go for it.
Okay, so true or false, or what's real, what's not. So one, I have a 100-meter backstroke pool record in Japan 36 years after I set it back in 1987. And the other thing is I am a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu instructor, brown belt, which is true.
Just to give some context for the guests, the true and false thing is just a fun thing that we do. So you've got to guess what's true and what's false. So who believes the first one is true? Who believes the second one is true? You can't do it.
It could be though.
Yeah, it could be, but it's likely to be either one is true, or sorry, one is false, or both are false. So who's going both are false?
No.
Oh, okay. So what is it?
Okay, so I do actually still hold a 100-meter backstroke pool record in Kanagawa-ken in Japan, 36 years after I set it. Wow. My host brother in Japan keeps reminding me. I was an exchange student when I was 15, 16 in Japan for a year. And I swam at a national level in 3 countries, so
That's awesome.
cool.
Not a brown belt?
I'm not a brown belt, I'm a green belt. Yeah, I do actually teach Jiu-Jitsu on Monday nights at PCYC Redcliffe. I teach the little kids. My husband instructs the adults and everything, and I'm still learning, and sometime before I'm 60, I'll get my black belt. So, yeah, cool. All right, so today, what I want to share with you today is about your website. So is there anybody in the room who does not have a business website? One. Okay, that's just not yet.
That is not yet.
That is not yet. Okay, so what I want you to do is think of your business website and answer some questions. You will see on your table there is a QR code that will take you to a questionnaire. I highly recommend you run through that questionnaire because I'm going to skim over some of the questions. Yep. So yeah, on your table you'll find a QR code. I recommend you do the questionnaire on the front page. Don't do it now because it'll take more than the 10 minutes we've got. On the front page, it'll ask you for your email address so that you can get a copy of the answers to the questionnaire when you're finished. So there's 4 pages of questions. The first page of questions is focused on, do you understand what level of ownership you have over your website? So a website, which is all of the data and the content that people see when they come to your domain name, is something quite different from your domain name. So your domain name is the address that people find you, like Onyx Legal. So our domain name we're a bit trendy. We've got a top-level domain ending of .legal. So there's no .com.au or any of those things. So our domain name is onyx.legal. That's it. We have the right to use that because we pay license fees every year to retain it. In fact, we pay them 5 years in advance because apparently that has something to do with impacting your rankings. I don't know that. That's not a legal thing. So your domain name is your address. And in order to work out what level of control you have over that address, it's like a post office box. If you forget to pay for it, they give it to someone else. You need to do a who is search. So if you've got a .com.au or a .au address, go to Auda, A-U-D-A. Just search Auda who is. That will give you a report, and on that report, you're looking for the registrant. Now, the registrant should be you. If it is not you, if it is your former web developer or a former employee or someone you used to do business with, you have a problem because you have no control over your domain name. And there are ways and means of getting that control back. So if you had your website developed before about 2012, it would not be a surprise if it's in the name of your former web developer, because that's the way people did things. But nowadays, it really should be in your name, and if it's not, come and have a chat with us. We'll help you sort that out. Okay, now the other side of websites, all the content and everything, is your hosting. And your hosting is probably in a separate place to where your domain name is registered. you need to know who your hosting provider is, where that data is stored, whether it's in Australia or somewhere overseas, and that you have an auto renewal on the payment for that, keep maintaining that website data and making sure it's accessible all the time, because otherwise your website disappears and people can't see anything. So hosting and domain name, so website content, everything you see on a page, and the addresses where people find you are two separate things. All right, the other really, really important thing on websites is if you want to avoid dealing with ransomware attacks, make sure your website is backed up and is backed up in somewhere separate to where your website content is hosted. This is a techie question. Go and have a chat with your techie and make sure they have a functioning backup system, because that's how you avoid dealing with ransomware. If you've got a functioning backup, your techie people can pull down and reload your website without having to address ransomware, and they can get rid of the ransomware. Otherwise, you are paying, and you may be paying for a long time to get your website reinstated. So backup's exceptionally important.
And highlight that point about backups elsewhere,
Yeah.
especially when you ask their tech.
Yeah, when you're speaking to your tech, make sure the backup is somewhere separate, because when the ransomware people, if it's in the same place as where your website content is, it's probably restricted as well. So be aware of that. Have that security in place, very important. Okay, protecting your business. Who has terms and conditions or terms of use on their website? Who doesn't know if they have terms of use or terms and conditions on their website? Okay, you should have at least basic terms of use. One of the reasons you do this is so that if anybody wants to pick a fight with you, they have to come here to Brisbane to pick a fight with you. There was a case a number of years ago where a blogger in the UK made some unfavourable comments about one of those online games. I think the game was called Evony. The developers of the game were in the US. He was in the UK. They sued him for defamation out of Sydney. And they did that because he had no terms and conditions on his website which restricted where they could sue him, and they were looking for the best venue for what they thought would give them a payout. Ultimately, that court case disappeared because all the players at Evony said to the owners of Evony, "We will boycott your name unless you pull your head in," which they promptly did. So that disappeared. But there is a risk that you can be sued somewhere else in the world, which there are benefits to that. Sometimes there are also risks, but if you want to make sure you have the most control over managing and protecting your business, have terms of use on your website. Just at least saying the governing law is Queensland, Australia. Privacy. If you don't have a privacy policy on your website, then that restricts your ability to use Facebook advertising, Google advertising, all of that sort of thing, because they require links to privacy policies. As a small business, a small business for privacy law is a business with a turnover of less than $3 million. If you're in the US, the it's CCPA. Anyway, the privacy law in California applies to small businesses with a turnover of large businesses with a turnover of 25 million or more. In Australia, it's 3 million or more. Just shows you some scale. But here, if you've got a small business turnover less than 3 million, you're not necessarily obliged to comply with privacy law, but it is a good idea to do so anyway, because it protects your online presence and it gives you credibility with your customers. Small businesses in Australia that collect any health information, which includes life coaches and PTs, or which collects data to on-sell to other people, which would be your website, Tiger, then you do have to comply with privacy law. So it's important to have it. Disclaimers on websites are important if you're in any sort of risk-based industry or regulated industry. So as a lawyer, we're regulated, financial advisors are regulated, mortgage brokers are regulated. You would normally have disclaimers on your website, health services. Okay, all right. The next page of questions is focused on your content. Do you own your content? Who knows anything about copyright here? Who's heard of copyright? Okay, there are two aspects of copyright. There is copywriting, which is writing really cool sounding stuff for your website. And there's copyright, which is a legal thing, which is a bundle of rights. So for example, if you write a book, you have copyright in the content of the pages of the book. You might have copyright in the typesetting of the book. You have copyright ability to license or have that book translated into different languages, and you can separate it into each different language. You might have the right to turn that into a movie. All of those rights, that's what copyright is. It's this huge bundle of rights. And it is automatic upon creation. So if you didn't create the content that is visible on your website, who did? And who owns it? We've got a software developer right now who, over the course of 15 years, developed a piece of software which is used in one business. And there has never been a transfer of copyright. So that business has never had a written license agreement, and license agreements can be implied, they don't have to be written, but there's never been a transfer which must be in writing. So this business thought they owned the software, and they tried to sell their business recently, and it fell over because in the due diligence process, it was discovered they did not own the software. And our lovely software developer client has now discovered that he has the entitlement to charge license fees after 15 years, which it never occurred to him previously. So his income is about to increase dramatically. This business that he built the software for has a turnover of $900,000 per week. So they can afford to pay for their software, which runs their entire business. And we are helping to protect their business and their ability to sell that business in the future by documenting this agreement with our client, the software developer. Naturally, the company that has had free use of software for 15 years is a little bit upset about the process, but they'll get there. So if you did not create the content on your website, you need to make sure that you have some level of ownership over that, and you can check that with us. Okay, the last thing I want to address is security around your website. Do not use a username admin. It's very dodgy. That's the first thing hackers check. So for example, if you've got who's got a WordPress website? Just about everyone, okay. If your login is admin, you're putting your business at risk immediately. Go and change it. Do it today, please, quickly.
Don't do root either.
Root?
OOT. It's a standard thing for admins to use.
Okay, don't do that.
Or SA.
Okay, don't do that. So protection around your website, make sure you've got an SSL, use usernames or usernames for access that don't match any of the authors on the website, aren't admin, are a little bit obscure, to better protect your website. And check who has back-end access to your website. I don't know about you, I have a Xero account. My accounting firm has about 10 people on that account. It scares the hell out of me. You need to know who has access to your systems and what they do. So there's a really quick, hurried overview of protecting your business through your online presence. If you do that questionnaire, you'll be able to go through those questions in detail. You'll get a score at the end. That score will tell you where you sit and what you might like to do to better protect your online presence. And by all means, please contact us if you've got any questions about that. Okay.
Okay, so we now have time for questions. Who has some questions for Jeanette?
I've just bamboozled you all. Yeah,
Not
Deb.
a question so much, but I just want to let everyone know that Jeanette did a beautiful interview with me where she goes into a little bit more detail around some of those things, like owning your content and whatnot. So if anyone's interested, I'll give you the link for that. Some good information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, I used to run my own web hosting company, so that pass123 is not a good password either. The keyboard has upper and lower case, and it has symbols. Use them all.
Yep.
And make it long.
I have heard that if your password is 12 digits, it's exponentially stronger than one of 11 digits. So go for big, long passwords. Use a password manager if you can't remember your passwords. All of us have hundreds of them nowadays. Password managers are fabulous.
For an example, one of my resellers got hacked. His email got hacked in Sydney. My server tech was in northern England, and he cracked the password in 2 goes and didn't know diddly squat about the guy. It was that simple. He just looked at his name and what he did and had 2 goes and got in.
Yeah.
And the client
Yeah.
just couldn't believe it.
And in actual fact, the Australian government has now got a online security portal for small business and individuals. It's worth, I can't remember what it's called, I do apologise, but it is worth going and checking that out. It gives you some really simple checks and balances you can put in place around your business to reduce the likelihood of being hacked. Okay.
So there's something else I'll add if there's no more questions. So I actually had Janet do my contracts, and I've actually had about 2 other lawyers attempt them before, and they were illegible. It's usual legal speak, whereas when Jeanette did it, it's quite easy flow, easy to understand, easy to read. So I highly recommend referring Jeanette, or if you want someone to actually have a look at it for yourself. As much as we don't sell it to anyone in the room, but if you want to buy from her, by all means, I recommend it. The other point that you made, though, was the terms and conditions, having that on the website and then putting it into your invoice, so that at every time you give an invoice, the terms and conditions link is there, which, what was the reason you said for it?
So what happens is when you've got particularly terms of service, you want people the opportunity to read them before the point of purchase in order to make sure they apply. And often people forget that they've even had the chance to see them. You know, they just tick and flick and on they go. They never read them. If you add them in a link to your invoice and they have the opportunity to see them every time you issue an invoice, it's very hard for them to say, oh, I never agreed to that and I never saw that, because every time you interact with them, you're giving them the opportunity to read them again. So yeah, I highly recommend having a link in your invoice to your terms of service, just to reinforce with your customers that you do actually operate with terms and conditions.
All right.
Cool.
Any other questions? Cool. Thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you very much.